In January 2001, Jason Newsted abruptly left Metallica. The fans felt shocked and confused. The official announcement quoted personal motives and the physical harm that he had inflicted on my own body during the years past in playing the music that he loved. Yet lurking behind this politically correct press release was an ugly and more complicated reality, a tussle between Newsted and his fellow band members over a sideband called Echobrain, which would change the course of one of the greatest bands in the history of metal forever. Which is why today we are telling the truth about what actually occurred during this landmark turn of events involving the world of rock, and how Lars Ulrich himself has tried to come to terms with this ugly scar that almost killed Metallica. Living in Cliff's shadow, we need to go back to the start of Jason Newsted's time with Metallica in order to fully understand the Echobrain standoff. You could say that when Newsted joined the band in 1986, he wasn't just becoming the bassist, he was becoming a star. Cliff Burton died in a terrible bus accident on September 27, 1986. His death left a hole in the band that could not be filled. Newsted had to do the impossible and replace something that could not be replaced. He had a tough fight from the start. Even though he was smart and worked hard, he was often seen as different, put through hazing, and never fully accepted as Burton's replacement. The band's sadness over Cliff's death showed up in ways that had a direct effect on how they treated Newsted. Newsted would later say, "I've always felt like I was the replacement. Cliff was a legend, no matter how hard I worked. No one else could step into those shoes. They made sure I knew that too." The making of the 1988 album Injustice for All may have been the most well-known example of Newsted's low standing. Many metal fans think it's one of the worst things that could have happened, that Newsted's bass lines were mixed down so much on the final record that they are almost impossible to hear. Over the years, the band has given different technical reasons for this choice, but it was clear to Newsted that he wasn't Cliff. Lars Ulrich later said, "We were probably still mourning Cliff, and we weren't in the right mental state." This shows that grief played a part in how they were treated. The person who got hurt was Jason. This early dynamic set a routine that would stay in place for as long as Newsted was in the band. He was a member, but he was never quite on the same level as the others. Even with these problems, Newsted stayed very loyal to Metallica for many years, putting all of his creative energy into the band and putting aside his own artistic goals for the sake of the group. This unstable balance could not last long, though. The birth of Echobrain. After more than a decade with Metallica, Jason Newsted was feeling more and more artistically stifled by the late 1990s. While Metallica had gained unimaginable fame, Newsted's own ideas weren't given much room in the band's strict creative hierarchy, which was led by James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich. Newsted started working on a project with guitarist Dylan Donkin and drummer Brian Segrafena that would become Echobrain because he wanted to express his imagination in a way that didn't fit into Metallica's structure. This wasn't just a casual jam session. It was a serious musical project that showed off Newsted's more melodic and advanced side. "I had something called Echobrain," Newsted said. "It was my own music that didn't fit with Metallica. It gave me a way to express myself that I couldn't do in Metallica." The music itself was different from Metallica's aggressive sound. It had parts of alternative rock, atmospheric textures, and complex songwriting. This change in art wasn't a protest, it was just pure expression. At first, his friends seemed to be on board with the project, or at least they weren't openly against it. He even asked James Hetfield to hear some of Echobrain's work in the hopes that he would approve of it. But as the project grew and started to get interest from the business world, people's views quickly changed. When Metallica's label head heard Echobrain, he was interested in signing the band. This was the turning point. Suddenly, something that had been seen as a safe hobby was seen as something that could compete with Metallica. A lot of people in the band felt insecure after this happened, especially Hetfield, who had always put family first when it came to Metallica. He was very clear about what he believed. Metallica wasn't just a band, it was a family, and any outside projects that took away from that were seen as betrayal. This way of thinking might make sense given the band's troubled past, but it made things hard for Newsted, who was just looking for a way to express himself creatively and not as a replacement for his day job. The ultimatum, a band meeting that would change everything, finally let out all the steam about Echobrain. It was like Hetfield was giving Newsted a choice between Echobrain and Metallica while management was there. Newsted later said in an interview that James told him, "The management and I agree that this project of yours is hurting Metallica. He told me that if I kept work with Echobrain, I would no longer be with Metallica. He said he was there to keep Metallica safe. In an interview with Playboy in 2001, not long after he left, Newsted talked about the tough choice he had to make. It came down to this: I had to choose. While being in Metallica, I couldn't do Echobrain. The message said, you play in Echobrain, not Metallica. You are in Metallica if you don't do it. This ultimatum was the last straw for Newsted, who had been feeling artistically stifled and undervalued for years. Being told he couldn't have a side project after 15 years of being loyal to Metallica made him feel betrayed. It was even worse because he had hoped that Q Prime, Metallica's management company, would back Echobrain and find a way for both projects to work together. Instead, they stood with Hetfield and Ulrich, which made Newsted feel betrayed in many ways. The boss said, I never thought it would go that way. I thought they would tell me to go for it, man. It wasn't like that, though. When given an ultimatum and realizing that his loyalty had not won him anything, Newsted made the hard choice to leave Metallica, shocking fans all over the world and setting the band on a path that almost caused it to break up. Lars's perspective: we felt betrayed. Lars Ulrich was very important in the Echobrain standoff. Even though Hetfield gave the ultimatum, Ulrich's point of view was very important because he helped start Metallica and made many of the band's decisions. Lars probably first learned about Echobrain's big plans when he heard about them, but as the project moved forward, he probably became more worried about how it would affect Metallica. Lars had helped build Metallica from the ground up, so he was wary of anything that could break the band's unity or focus. He thought that Newsted was putting his whole heart and soul into something other than Metallica, which went against the band's core value of complete dedication. The question, wait a minute, you're putting your heart and soul into something else while Metallica is here, sums up how Ulrich and Hetfield felt about Newsted's side project. Betrayed. Ulrich saw Metallica as more than just a band. It took a lifetime of dedication and unwavering loyalty to see it through. That rule seemed to be broken by the idea that Newsted could split up his creative force. Lars would talk about this time in a more open way years later. In interviews and the documentary Some Kind of Monster, he talked about how highly charged and disorganized the band's work had become, and how much of the stress was unfairly put on Jason. The aftermath. When Newsted left Metallica, the band went through one of the worst times in its history. The band was already having problems with drug abuse and internal conflicts, and they almost broke up. Soon, Hetfield went to rehab, and the film Some Kind of Monster shows how painful it was to make their next album, Saint Anger. But Ulrich had to face some hard facts about how the band had treated Newsted during this time. The documentary shows how Metallica's therapy meetings with performance coach Phil Towell showed deep problems within the band, such as the control issues that had made Newsted leave. People are angry about who controls the creative process, who is in charge of what. Ulrich admitted in one session, which showed the real problem that was making their relationship difficult. Both Ulrich and Hetfield learned more about the Echobrain effects over time. They never said they were sorry, but they did admit that they could have handled things better. Hetfield said in a later interview, to look back, yes, maybe we could have been more open, but we couldn't do that at that time because of our lives and where the band was. Newsted moved on at the same time. Echobrain's first record came out in 2002 and got mixed reviews, but the band was still proud of it. The band went on a short tour and got praise for its skill as players and unique sound, but it never became a big hit. Echobrain wasn't about fame for Newsted, it was about freedom. His next step was to join Voivod. He then went on tour with Ozzy Osbourne during Ozfest 2003 and finally started his own project called Newsted. He kept making art on his own terms, without giving in. I've never felt bad about leaving Metallica. In a SiriusXM interview years later, he said, never. Everyone should have done it. Some scars have healed over time. When Metallica was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2009, Newsted got back together with the band. He also played with them at their 30th anniversary shows. Even though the Echobrain conflict caused a lot of pain, these times of peace show that the musicians' history and respect for each other have not changed. Was James Hetfield's demand fair, or should Newsted have been able to go after Echobrain with Metallica?